So this discussion pops up every now and then online, which is that who are the bloods of college football? And I don't see it all the time, but I see enough that Georgia's not considered a blue blood. I'm going to go straight to Matt. That Georgia's not considered a blue blood, and I'm like, well, then what's a blue blood? Because if
Yeah.
it's not Georgia, I don't know what it is.
Yeah, I have some Florida and Tennessee buddies who still just don't consider Georgia a blue blood. I've seen it on the Twitters too. A lot of Texas and Oklahoma people. They're clapping for Georgia, saying congratulations, whatever on your latest two national championships. You're not a blue blood. Georgia has
Texas.
passed Tennessee in wins. They've got more national championships than a lot of these programs in the last 50 years. For me personally, I don't care what you did like 60 years in and all that. I mean, modern national championships, when there's just one undisputed national champion, that matters more than whatever they tied for in the 40s and 50s. And I know Georgia won one in 42, but the ones that are more recent, I think, mean more. But yeah, they passed Penn State and Tennessee and a lot of other schools. I think if we're talking about, the top 10 programs, or what is blue blood? Is that the top 6 like all
You
time?
tell
I think
me.
we need some
You tell
definitions
me,
here.
and then we'll go to Ryan. What is a blue blood? And then we'll start going through who they actually are.
I would say maybe the top 8 programs,
Okay.
I guess, of all time, schools with history, championships in different eras,
Of
maybe a
all
couple
time.
Heisman's. That have done it for a long, long time.
Okay. Ryan?
Are we running through them, or am I just?
Well, I mean, I think you can give your definition of what a blue blood is.
What's your definition?
Well, I think the championships matter for sure, but at what point do you cut that off? And it's like we're talking about a completely different game of football.
Yes, exactly. Thank you for that point.
And it's the same thing with basketball as well. It has changed a lot.
But wait, let's set the stage with basketball though, because I think basketball with blue bloods, it's relatively easy because all of them have the color blue, or at least the vast majority.
And a lot of them got red in football. So
in football, yeah. So like in basketball, I think there are these 4 that I'm about to say are unquestionably blue bloods: Carolina, Duke, Kansas, and Kentucky. Those 4. All right. There's no disagreement with this group about that. Correct?
Yeah. No.
Do you want to argue now UCLA and UConn? Because I don't think there's much question in UConn as a
those were the other 2 I was gonna say.
Yeah. So do you? I mean, like, do people want to talk about Louisville? Louisville's definitely way up there. Is
Arizona?
Is Indiana? I don't think Indiana is. They've not done anything for a century. This century, they've gone to Final Four once. So
I see Michigan State's the other one that's thrown in there sometimes.
Michigan State could certainly be in that universe. And maybe people's argument, Ryan, is that Georgia is the Michigan State of the college football blue blood argument. I'll let you take it from there.
A little bit of the more modernized version of that.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, Magic played there and won a national championship in 79. Is 79 modern?
It's not. Okay, I mean, that was 46 years ago. Yeah. So, I mean, I don't know. But so are we going to – you want to try to do it?
Go. Let's see what you got. I mean, go ahead.
I mean, Bama's one of them.
Notre Dame,
USC.
Okay.
Texas.
Okay.
So that's 4. Are we doing 6 or 8?
Michigan, Ohio State,
Michigan
Oklahoma.
and Ohio State. You're not going to do Oklahoma?
I would.
Well,
I think that they're in there, yeah.
So see, this is.
But so is Georgia not there? We hadn't said Georgia.
Well,
I said Georgia's probably top 10. Georgia is above LSU and Penn State, and Florida, and Clemson,
and who?
And Clemson.
Yeah, Clemson would be more. Yeah. Go ahead, keep going.
They're right there with Nebraska. I think Georgia could pass Nebraska.
Yeah. So I think
you could play yourself out of blue blood territory, which is what Miami and maybe Nebraska and Tennessee was on the verge of doing. I mean, you can play yourself out and play yourself in, I think.
Did you say LSU?
They're on the cusp right there. I think maybe not historical.
Okay, so I think.
If you can play yourself out and play yourself in, then what's the basis of the conversation?
That's what I was about to get to.
Okay.
So what is blue blood as it relates to historic? Georgia, in terms of the history of college football, you'd have to have a bigger blue blood group. I don't think that you can, and I would say the same thing for LSU, Georgia, probably Tennessee, and in some cases, probably Oklahoma and Texas. In some cases, I mean, it depends on your definition. the traditional blue bloods of college football are probably only these 5 schools in the grand scheme of things: SC, Notre Dame, Michigan, Ohio State, and Alabama. Those would be the 5. Like, the problem with that group is that Notre Dame's not done anything for coming on 30 years now. I mean, like, they're just, it's not good. At least Michigan and Ohio State do their part. SC's coming on not doing much, Matt, for like 20 years now. So we're kind of pushing the edge there. And like, it's not like where Georgia didn't do anything for an extended period of time and still had top 10s or narrow misses. I mean, like, SC is just falling off a cliff. So I think today's modern, what I would say this. I mean, I don't see how you can have someone other than Alabama. Alabama is certainly cream of the crop right now. Number 2 right now would be Georgia, and those two could flip flop. But in this century, I would say Alabama for sure. SC has done their part this century, but it's getting long in the tooth. Georgia, Ohio State, maybe those two are flip-flopped. Maybe they're not, Ryan. Michigan, only lately. What's bizarre, y'all, is who's had a better century, Clemson or Michigan?
Clemson.
I would make sure you know everything before you say that, because if you forget the 2000s, Clemson didn't have a 10-win season.
Michigan was so bad there for a little bit too, and I think the national titles, in my opinion, because I remember the Clemsoning was a real thing, and that was bad. And it was funny, so funny.
Well, but
they got it together
for the first 15 seasons, not the first 15 years, first 15 seasons of this century, that was Clemson.
Yeah,
and
they would trade that for what happened shortly after, I think.
Sure.
Yeah.
How about where is Miami in all of this? Ryan.
It's been a while. It's been a long time. I can't remember Miami doing anything cool. I can't remember Nebraska I'm only 23 at this point, but I don't remember Miami or Nebraska doing a single thing since I've been watching football. So I do think that there are eras, and it's kind of like the NBA arguments and I think the decades are a better way to look at it too, because I think you see changes kind of every 5-10 years as well. So in that sense,
none of us have mentioned Florida State. None of us have mentioned Florida State either. Is that fair?
They don't immediately come to mind, but they've had some great moments, some great times, and they've got historical figures that have played for them, just like Penn State. But Penn State is another program that was so highly regarded for the longest time, especially in the 80s, and then year after year after year, 20, 25, 30 years go by, and it's like, wow, they haven't done anything. In my lifetime, Notre Dame and Penn State don't have national championships. So I do think, from going back to the blue blood conversation, it is historical, and a lot of it is, like Ryan said, different eras and Heisman's and national championships. But it does take a lot to play yourself out of one of the greats programs. And Nebraska's doing that, and Penn State's doing that, and Miami's doing that. Whereas Georgia was always a respectable program. Everyone thought they were a good program and a respectable program. Now you look what they're doing. They're going to pass Southern Cal in all-time wins eventually, and they're creeping up there in top 10 in basically every statistical category all time. And yet, at some point, have to put them in there in that all-time status, because what you do recently is included in all time. So just another way to look at it, I guess.
Go ahead, Ryan.
Yeah, you can't ignore the bad stretches either for all these programs too, and all of them have that. But I just don't think there's a perfect way to calculate all of it, because we're going to be comparing what someone did in the 70s to what someone did in the 2010s, and it's just completely different look at what was going on. Different leagues, different levels of competition, right?
Real quick,
did Kirby Smart has to deal with the Nick Saban, and has to deal with that kind of thing. That affects Georgia's legacy, right? So I just think it's hard to look at it that way. But Georgia, at this point, I think you have to say it's a top 10 program all time.
Go ahead, Matt.
What's been the most consistent program, I guess, since 2000? Is that Ohio State?
Ohio
When's the last time
State
Ohio
has
State
been.
was bad?
Who's that?
When's the last time Ohio State had a bad team
They
or an
were
even
not
average
great
team?
when they transitioned away from.
That was the 90s, right?
Well,
Yeah.
well, in the 90s they were bad, but or not good at least. What I was trying to say was, when you think about Ohio State and the transition to Urban Meyer, that was a rough couple of years. It wasn't horrific like Florida's gone through, but it wasn't good either. I mean,
but that was a little bit of off-field kind of stuff too,
yes,
right?
correct.
Terrell Pryor and all that.
Because like they had that one year where they couldn't play in the postseason, but they were one of the best teams.
Correct.
So
Georgia's consistency it has really put them in there too. Georgia's had two bad teams in 24 years? Was that 10 and 13? 2000.
I mean, if 8-5 is bad, then yeah, they've had a bad season. But
09 wasn't great, but they still won a bowl game and beat their rivals.
Yeah, they've not just fallen off a cliff like some of these teams that we've seen over the years. There's been, I'm trying to get to the page in the media guide, and they're all digital media guides, which is not a problem. I prefer that in many ways. But I can't just flip to it the way I used to be able to with the amount of wins. All-time win, I just don't trust some online thing that's saying
the teams
stuff.
They beat in the 20s.
What's that?
The teams that Michigan beat in the 20s. I think there was a women's Baptist team.
Georgia beat Presbyterian and the Athens YMCA as well. I mean, they're not above those. They're not above claiming the Birmingham National Championship from 1923, but at the same time, I just want to make sure I get to this right thing. I do think that I do think that this century it's been Ohio State, y'all, more than anybody who's been better. They just have lost too many. They lost national championship and
to the Gators.
Well, they lost to the Gators. They didn't lose to Clemson. They lost to the Gators. Lost to Alabama. They lost. They lost in the Clemson in the semifinals. Lost to Georgia in the semifinals. I mean, they've had some. They've been right there in many ways, y'all, and they just have not quite gotten it done. It happens.
You're saying the best?
They've been the most consistent.
Because it's Alabama.
Oh, this century.
Yeah.
I stand corrected. It's definitely Alabama now that you say that. But
I would say from 2006 on, I guess
there's
for
no
sure.
Question, 2000.
Yeah, but even with those first 6 years, it's Alabama.
It is Alabama, and I'm going to get to this page. So help me God. But the Tennessees of the world, or that could happen to Georgia. I don't think it will, where you just lose a decade and a half or whatever. Here we go, y'all. Excuse me. All time, Ohio State, then Bama, then Michigan, then Notre Dame. Boise's at 5. Oklahoma's at 6. So we're not gonna. So Oklahoma's at 6. Texas 7. SC is at 8. Georgia passed some of these now. These are just by all-time wins. Penn State, Nebraska, Tennessee, Florida State, and then Georgia. But the wins, Georgia went 13-1. So they have passed Tennessee, and they also have passed
Southern Cal,
USC. This is by percentage, yeah. So that's not quite right. So Georgia would be in the top 10 of all time, but is Penn State a bigger deal than Georgia? I would argue that they're not. Now, they are a big deal, but there's only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 programs who've got over 900 wins. That's Ohio State, Bama, Michigan, Notre Dame, Oklahoma, and Texas. And Penn State and Nebraska. The only SEC team in there, Matt, is Alabama. That's it.
Yeah. Shows how far the conference has come.
Texas and Oklahoma did not even play in the same league until about 20 years ago. Yeah. So a lot of these wins are over Big 10 schools. Big 8 schools. The discussion of Clemson, they are not in the top 20 all time. Florida is at 17. Miami is at 18. Auburn is at 18. So, school. Oh, I'm sorry, y'all. I didn't even read it right. Georgia extended its lead over USC and is getting closer to Nebraska. Georgia coming into 2024 will be the number 9 overall school with 881 all-time wins. That's a lot.
How far behind Nebraska are they?
About 20?
About 20, yeah.
So it'll take him 2.
It'll take them probably 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
Because you got to add them up pretty quick unless, the other thing.
Because they'll win 6-7 games if Matt Rule's the guy. So at least.
Yeah, Georgia could win 16 or 17 games this year, Matt. That's the other difference. All-time bowls, Georgia number 2 Georgia number 2 all-time. All-time SEC championships, Georgia number 2 all-time. There's a lot there in terms of
the numbers say they're there with a lot of other programs.
There is one SEC school that is definitely better than Georgia. That is Alabama. After that, I would say Ohio State, Michigan, and Notre Dame. But like the discussion of Oklahoma, Texas, SC, Penn State, Nebraska. I mean, all due respect to anyone that ever played in the Southwestern Conference or the Big 8, it's not the same, and it has never been the same. And, by the way, not like they're some power now, but Georgia Tech has in the history of the world, that's been the team that Georgia played every year to end the year. And they may be a joke now, but I can assure you they were not in the 60s and 70s, in the 40s in their heydays, back when everybody's grandfather drank their whiskey clear. Final comment from Ryan, then Matt.
Yeah, I think that they've entered top 10 status. And if we're talking about just who are the Blue Bloods right now, it's no question that, look, they're the best program in college football right now. And it's been that way for a few years. So if you've got that status and they can extend that for even just a couple more years, it's undeniable that they're one of the Blue Bloods.
Yeah, I think they're a red blood.
That's what I was saying.
Talking about Blue Bloods in football. They're a red blood. Yeah, I like that. But yeah, they have made their statement, I think, in college football and where they are, and they're only going to climb that ladder. Wherever they are now, it's going to increase over the next few years.
Thanks for watching.